I'm going to take you somewhere different. I work in building spaces. I work in physical spaces. However, there are lots of links to what we're all doing. And I think especially as you come to think about shifting your story into alternate environments, there are things to do with story that we can all work with. I was asked to design an immersive environment for a space called ACME, Australian Centre for the Moving Image, in 2001. And when they asked me to think about immersion, what they expected me to come back to them with was an installation that where the video surrounded you, so that you were actually inside a space that would completely contain you inside the vision. It's what we mostly think about when we think about immersion. But I had spent a lot of time working with scientists, marine biologists and astronomers, and what I noticed was that there is a state of immersion that's very similar to the state of meditation. That is the state that you go into when you're highly, highly focused. And at that point of extreme focus, everything else falls away. Time disappears, and you start to become immersed in the thing that you're viewing. So the work that I proposed to them was a work of video projections, which in fact were extremely small. The way you experience this work is you come to a place and you're asked to pick up a glass bowl. I have these made by a glass artist in Australia. And all you are asked to do is to enter this space. When you enter the space, there are projections, beams of light falling into the room. Let's take this right down so you can hear that there is sound. And what you have to do in a very exploratory way is find the focal point, catch these images inside the bowl. Early projection screens were made out of sandblasted glass, so in fact there's a strong link to the history of cinema in this work. But in fact what's happening is you're holding the image in your own hands. And something happens between the haptic and the optic. When we are touching something, things happen to us that is not possible to happen to us when we're distant. And you can see the content of this work is very much environmental, yet no one is telling you anything. I don't have to say to you a word about the complexity of these places that you're looking at, or the interconnected systems that we are viewing here. However, you're holding something that's fragile in your hands, and inside it are these worlds. And if you drop that bowl, it really will break. I look for universal gestures that require hardly any explanation, so that in this space, when it's crowded and there are people all hovering around a glass bowl, when a stranger comes in and someone offers them this bowl, there's a communal moment that occurs there that requires no explanation. Yet everything in that moment is telling us this is somehow my responsibility, the handing on of this thing. I haven't found anyone yet who doesn't understand that gesture. The thing that happens in this work is that you start to view other people viewing the work. So one of the things that I think a lot about is how can we create communities amongst strangers, and how can we do that through storytelling in such a way that we have the most essential elements, but that maybe we leave the words to the minimum, so that in fact I input my own thinking into the work. And when I start to do that, which is what happens when you leave a lot of space inside a work, you can have powerful music, but take the words away. You leave the space for people to put themselves inside the work. And once they do that, it becomes their story, and then they want to tell it. The next work that I was commissioned to do was a work for a very particular site in Melbourne, which was the site of Melbourne's first morgue, and yet now it's a visitor centre. And interestingly, the location for this work is a very public place, and it was for the middle of a festival. So it was a time when everyone was, really excited, and there was a lot of attention and everyone was going out, and yet I was asked to make a work which was about this morgue. So I, in fact, decided to focus on the thing that unifies all of us, and that is, in fact, grief, because none of us will escape that sadness. All of us will be linked in some way to someone that we lose. I was travelling on a car that was travelling up this main street of Melbourne, and a woman approached me. She had a little piece of paper in her hand. She saw that I was waiting for the tram. She had dark glasses on. She had this tiny little bit of paper, and she said to me, I need to find this location, but I haven't slept for the last 3 nights, and so I'm frightened I'll miss it. And she asked me if I would help her. And I said I would, and we started talking. She told me her mother had died the week before, and she was very, very close to her mother. They'd had the funeral, but she couldn't stop crying. And her husband had said to her, you know, you need to stop this now. You need to get yourself together. So she had rung a chemist, a pharmacist, and she was on her way to the pharmacist to get some sort of sedative. So what happened was she and I got on the tram, and we had this incredible, intimate discussion about grief, travelling on public transport in the middle of Melbourne. And at some point I realised that everyone around us was listening to this story. No one was speaking, and people were offering this woman an incredibly private space because she was crying and she was mourning. And at one point I said, I think this is your stop, and because I have a notoriously bad sense of direction, I'd gotten it wrong. And the man sitting next to me, who'd been completely silent and just sitting there with his head down, he leaned over very quietly and he said, it's not this one, it's the next one. So when this woman got up off the tram, she waved goodbye to all of us. And again, I thought, this is an incredible moment of communal storytelling about something which she has nowhere to grieve. So I decided then to make this work for her. I placed a woman who was mourning in the middle of a festival, in the middle of a city. She's filmed behind condensation, and she paces backwards and forwards from dawn till dusk. But the moment someone places their hand on that glass, she begins to wipe away a small piece of condensation. So you can see her and she can see you. So the work is responsive to the touch of a stranger. And what happens then is you have this moment where she looks at you. And usually people are standing there with their hand on the glass. You can see that I designed this work so it had a sense of timelessness. You couldn't really tell how old she is or what era this is. And I think another kind of thing to do with my work and why it links to documentary as well is not just that the story was informed by someone I met, but this is a very dear friend of mine, Ivy, and she lost her partner very suddenly. So when I said to her I wanted to do this work, she asked me if she could be the person who is grieving. So what you are seeing in this is, from my perspective, it's not a performance. It's more like someone's revealing something. And so when I'm filming, I need to set up the constraints within that I don't get something performative, that I get something, in fact, that is more like a revealing. So if we can hit that note in our storytelling, that helps you to identify and come to the place of ownership and belonging inside the story instead of watching outside the story, and we feel compelled to act because it's no longer something someone's telling us about, it's something that we are a part of. So, shall we talk?